In a recent stream, Pillar of the Souls community Epic Namebro posed the question, what does Dark Souls mean to you? Turns out Dark Souls means a vast number of things to fans of the series. To some it implies punishing difficulty, to others it means the shared joy of piecing together the game's lore with their fellow players. To some it conjures visions of crumbling yet still proud architecture, while others will say it's all about the bosses. And it is sort of about the bosses. But for me, Souls has always been a personal journey, about trying to retain hope when everyone and their dogs are against you. It's about pushing through these forlorn and brutal worlds, beating your head on something over and over until you're bloody and ragged, but knowing that it broke before you did. It's about the hope that an individual can create a better world given enough grit, guts, and bloody-mindedness. And it's for that reason I think Dark Souls 3's Ashes of Ariandel DLC is the single best expansion to any of the 3 games in the series. Yes, it's short, yeah there are only 2 bosses and one of them is a warmed up rehash of a better fight from DS1, but its story about literally setting fire to a world so it can begin anew is a microcosm of everything that makes the overarching narrative of the series so interesting. Taking inspiration from the most compelling story beats of all 3 games, it's essentially Dark Souls the greatest hits. For those of you who haven't played it, Dark Souls 3 takes place in a world that cycles between periods of fire and darkness, and when we begin the game is rapidly succumbing to entropy at the end of a cycle of fire. This current age is effectively sustained artificially through the suffering of its population, and has been for the thousands of years since the first game, but the collapse and return to dark is inevitable, and soon all that suffering will have been for nothing. The painted world of Ariandel is a world apart, hidden within a painting. It is explicitly a refuge for people who fear the outside world, and only long for cold and comfort. However, it too has begun to rot. We know from in-game lore and the presence of a strikingly similar location in Dark Souls 1 that the painted worlds are themselves subject to a sort of cycle, wherein once the rot begins they are burned so a new painting can be created. As above, so below. And just like in the main world of Dark Souls 3, occasionally someone tries to pervert that cycle to sustain their own existence past its natural end. Like Gwyn in the real world, Sister Frieda has halted that change, and consequently the residents of the painted world live in a sort of rotting limbo, suffering indefinitely. That's most clearly demonstrated in the Corvian hamlet, the residents of which live in squalor and are hunted by atavistic members of their own kin to reinforce Sister Frieda's will. Here in this hamlet we see the accumulated misery caused by this denial to accept that one's time has to come to an end, and I can't think of any other location in the Souls series that so thoroughly demonstrates why the attempt to artificially prolong Gwyn's kingdom was the world's first sin. The stories of the NPCs of Dark Souls have always been the most compelling part of the games, because while ultimately the world is doomed to change, what matters is the comfort you can give to others along the way, even if you have to dash yourself upon a boss or 2 to make it happen. That creates, for me at least, a particularly strong drive to clear this area, defeat Frieda, and effectively create that better world. Such is the misery that's evident in the Corvians that I'm sure that would be true for anybody with no prior experience of the series too, but Ashes of Ariandel also touches upon story beats from other parts of the series. For instance, it reveals what became of the painted world of Ariamis and its residents, implying a bittersweet ending to an enigmatic portion of Dark Souls 1. As in Dark Souls 2, we see a child of dark beguile a powerful ruler for their own ends, which brings the land to ruin. It expands upon the lore of the Sisters of the Sable Church from Dark Souls 3, providing some coherent answers to questions raised in a base game that sorely lacked a cohesive story. And it touches on little details from across the series, like the Bell of Awakening that Frieda has removed to prevent an agent of change from arising. You can argue that such explicit links and nods to prior content are just fan service, and that it contributes to the Dark Souls sequel's problems that they're just shackled to the narrative of the first game. And to an extent I completely agree, that is a major weakness of the series and it can't be overlooked. But compared to Dark Souls 3's final DLC, The Ringed City, which promised us answers but only gave us non-sequiturs, I'll take a greatest hits approach any day. It doesn't hurt either that the area can be absolutely gorgeous, that the art direction of some of the enemy design is inspired, and that Black Flame Frieda is one of the most fun bosses of the whole series. But really what makes Ashes of Ariandel the best DLC is that it validates the struggles the player has gone through over the course of the 3 games. In a series where light and dark are 2 sides of a spinning coin, and the endings are left deliberately ambiguous, this DLC gives us that concrete reason to carry on fighting. Whether it's intentional or not, Ashes of Ariandel provides what I believe is From Software's definitive statement on the morality of the world of Dark Souls, using those familiar beats to tie it all together. We might not be able to prevent the world from falling to dark. Maybe that's not even a bad thing. But what we can do is provide a precious amount of comfort to the characters that we've met along the way. And that's hope of a kind.
Oh, my, thank you. I can hear the crackling from here. The sound of my home. The painting of Ariandel burning away.